The first chapter of our journey into a 1970s British New Year's Eve begins not with the glitter of fairy lights, but with a deep, almost tangible darkness. To understand why this period hits so hard, one must imagine the political and economic backdrop of the time. Britain in the 70s was a country on the edge. Endless miners' strikes, an energy crisis, and soaring inflation led Edward Heath's government to introduce the 3-day week. Saving electricity became a matter of national survival. For millions of British families, this meant that New Year's celebrations could at any second turn into an evening by candlelight, not by romantic design, but due to scheduled blackouts. Imagine the scene. December 31st, a typical British slush or rare wet snow outside, and suddenly the lights go out in the houses. The TV, which was just broadcasting festive tunes, turns into a black rectangle, and the only source of heat remains the coal fireplace. In that moment, an amazing thing happened. Instead of the panic and irritation that would grip a modern person deprived of Wi-Fi and a smartphone charger, a strange, almost primal silence settled over families. Old brass candlesticks were brought out. Household candles, always kept ready in the kitchen drawer, were lit, and the home filled with a soft, living amber glow. This darkness did not divide. It united. It forced people to move closer to the fireplace, toward the source of warmth. In these conditions, preparing for the holiday became a true feat. Housewives managed to cook festive dinners on gas rings or even open fires if electric stoves failed. The smell of burnt toast mixed with the scent of paraffin candles and coal smoke became the smell of New Year for an entire generation. It was a celebration against the circumstances. People felt that despite the chaos in the economy and politics, their small world within the living room remained unshakable. Today we look at these images with a lump in our throats because we realize in that forced darkness there was more sincerity than in our brightly LED-lit modern apartments. We traded that silence and closeness for flawless comfort, but with it went that sharp sense of togetherness when the whole family, wrapped in itchy wool jumpers, waited for midnight, watching dancing shadows on the wallpaper. It was a true spirit of resilience that turned an ordinary calendar transition into a triumph of human warmth over the cold reality of the crisis. In the 1970s, the British New Year's Eve table was a world away from today's gourmet variety. This was an era before giant supermarkets filled with exotic fruits and pre-prepared delicacies from across the globe. The festive menu of that time was a triumph of resourcefulness, tinned goods, and home-cooked recipes that today evoke both a smile and a deep yearning for the simplicity of those years. Center stage on the table were items that might seem like amusing relics of the past to us now. For instance, the classic prawn cocktail in a glass, generously smothered in pink Marie Rose sauce, was considered the height of sophistication, and the legendary cheese and pineapple hedgehogs, chunks on toothpicks stuck into a foil-covered grapefruit half, were a mandatory attribute of every single party. The drinks also carried their own unique flair. Men favored canned beers like Watney's Red Barrel or heavy ales, while women often reached for baby cham, the sparkling perry with the little fawn on the label. Its fizz in the glass became the soundtrack of the decade. But the most important thing about the 70s New Year table was that almost everything was handmade. Housewives spent hours at the stove, baking mince pies and sausage rolls from scratch. The air was thick with the scent of home baking and tangerine peels. It was this invested labor that made the food taste so memorable. Today, when we can buy any delicacy with a few clicks, we realize we've lost that very taste of anticipation and the simple human warmth of a crowded, cozy living room. In the 1970s, television in Britain was more than just entertainment. It was the bonfire around which the entire nation warmed itself. In the era before the internet, smartphones, and streaming services, there were only 3 channels: BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV. This meant that when a New Year's special began, practically the whole country was watching the exact same thing. It created a unique, synchronized experience that is almost impossible to imagine today. On New Year's Eve, the TV in the living room stayed on, and its flickering light was the most important guest in every home. The most anticipated moment was always the Morecambe and Wise Christmas special. Eric and Ernie were the true kings of comedy, and their humor, kind, a bit silly, and quintessentially British, brought families of all generations together. The statistics from those years are staggering. Festive specials could draw up to 28 million viewers, nearly half the entire population of the country. When Big Ben struck midnight, people didn't just look at the screen. They lived that moment together with the entire nation. This was a time when social networks were replaced by discussing morning newspapers and talking over the fence with a neighbor. Did you see Eric's joke last night? Television provided a sense of security and stability in an unstable world. Today, when each of us has our own personal newsfeed and algorithms, we realize we have lost that great sense of belonging to something shared. This is why the footage of old BBC idents and the sounds of familiar theme tunes hit so hard. They remind us of a time when we were truly united in front of a single screen. If the television was the heart of the home, then the pub on New Year's Eve was the soul of the entire community. In the 1970s, heading to the local on December 31st was an essential ritual. It wasn't a place for elite relaxation. On that night, in a hall thick with cigarette smoke and the scent of ale, everyone collided. Factory workers, clerks, doctors, and retirees. The pubs held an atmosphere of incredible friendliness that is hard to find in big cities today. People who barely nodded to each other throughout the year suddenly embraced and sang Auld Lang Syne in unison as the clock hands neared 12. It was a living, pulsing social network where news traveled by word of mouth amidst the clinking of beer mugs. But the most important and slightly mystical part of a British New Year was the tradition of first footing. It was believed that the luck of the entire coming year depended on who first crossed your threshold after midnight. The ideal first footer was a tall, dark-haired man. Fair-haired men or women were considered harbingers of bad luck in some regions. He couldn't arrive empty-handed. He had to carry symbols of survival, a piece of coal for warmth, salt for wealth, bread for food, and a bottle of whiskey for cheer. These modest symbols of survival were taken almost seriously in the 1970s. In return, the guest had to be treated generously. Today, this tradition has practically vanished. We lock our doors with complex bolts and peer through spy holes instead of waiting for a stranger with a piece of coal. It is this loss of trust in our neighbors and the world outside our doorstep that hits so hard when we look back at those years. As we conclude our journey into a 1970s British New Year's Eve, we inevitably face the question, why do these images and memories evoke such a poignant sadness? This feeling is often called anemoia, a nostalgia for a time we may not have even lived through, or for a world that has changed beyond recognition. We look at grainy photographs of people in awkward synthetic shirts, sitting in dimly lit rooms, and we don't see poverty or crisis. Instead, we see something far scarcer today: authentic connection. In the 70s, while the outside world was full of strikes and darkness, the internal world of the British family was incredibly dense and protected. It hits so hard because today we have traded that tight-knit community for endless digital comfort. We no longer have the 3-day week or scheduled power cuts, but we also rarely have a reason to just sit in silence by the fire with our neighbors. We have become richer in things, but poorer in moments. The new year of the 70s reminds us that happiness didn't require 4K TVs or exotic delicacies. All it took was the warmth of a coal fire, the voice of a BBC announcer, and the certainty that you weren't alone. This nostalgia isn't just a longing for the past. It's a reminder of our human need for closeness, which no technology can replace. The shadows of a candle on the wallpaper in 1975 will forever remain a symbol of a time when we were poorer, but perhaps much closer to one another.